Using the electronic bidding feature in the travel tracker is a great way for you to know that your drivers are interested and available for a trip before you do the assignment. So it can help you out if you are currently making the assignment and then letting the driver respond back after that assignment if they're available or would like that trip. This will allow you to go ahead and know before you assign the trip that they are interested and available, and then you can assign them based on that. Um, Before you do the electronic bidding, you do have to think of a couple of things. One of the things that you'll think about is bid periods. A bid period is the number of days or weeks that you will show your drivers all the trips in that given bid period. And so your bid periods may be a week at a time or perhaps 2 weeks at a time. So for example, we're looking at the calendar here. If you wanted to allow your drivers to see a week at a time, then maybe your bid period would go from Sunday to Saturday. So trips going out, for example, from the 3rd through the 9th would be in a bid period. And you would open that bid period, and drivers would be able to bid on any trips going out between the 3rd and the 9th. If you had a 2-week bid period, then your bid period would be, for example, from the 3rd through the 16th. And so you have 2 weeks in the bid period, and any trips going out during that 2-week period would be available to the drivers to bid on and indicate their interest. Now you can open up more than one bid period at a time, so if you would like to um, have a month of trips available for your drivers, then you would open, for example, two-week bid periods, and then that would open up a month for you. Um, the um, the drivers would be able to see any trip and bid on any trip during that was approved and okay to be bid on during those bid periods. The transportation office would be responsible for opening and closing the bid periods so that if it is open, it is available to the driver. But once the drivers have bid, then you would close the bid period, and then you would make your assignments, and they would no longer be able to access that bid period once you had closed it. Um, when you open the bid period, it would be just a matter of um, your preference and when you would like to open it up and how long you want to leave it open is your preference. A lot of districts may a bid like a week or two before the trip starts. So for example, if your bid period was the 10th through the 16th, if it was a 1-week bid period, the 10th through the 16th, you may open the bid on the 4th, for example, and maybe leave it open for the 4th and the 5th. And then maybe on the 6th is when you would assign out those trips for the 10th through the 16th. And so you would open it on the 4th, close it on the 5th, assign trips on the 6th perhaps, and assign those drivers. But it's up to you as to how far before the trips are going out that you want to open the bid and have your drivers bid on them. And that's something that we can set up for you and whatever you think would be a good routine for you in your district. So once you have determined the bid periods, we would set those up for you. And then, of course, your trip request would come in as normal. And those trip requests, as they are submitted, would be then added to a particular bid period. And when it comes time to bid on those trips would be in the bid period based on the date that the trip is going. Now, when it's time to open a bid and allow the drivers to start bidding, you want to be sure before you open the bid that you do have good number of vehicles requested based on passenger count. And so one way to check that would be, of course, from the trip inquiry. That is a very easy way. And the reason for that is it does give you the options to pick particular bid IDs as well as zones. So you do have multiple zones. If you wanted to look at your, one zone at a time, you could pick certain zones, and then you could select the bid period that you would like to open. So this bid period is set up for the week of April the 7th, and so we would select that one. If we wanted to open up or check another one, we would simply click on the drop down and choose the correct bid period that we were wanting to check. And then you could even go and just, make sure that you're just looking at trips that still need a driver assignment. It's certainly possible that you may um, assign certain trips before the bid occurs, and you might not have to want to send that particular trip or need to check that trip because it already has an assignment. So we can see from my trip inquiry here that I have 10 trips that meet the criteria of this particular bid period with that are still pending a driver assignment. And I'm just going to want to very quickly just make sure that I have the right number of vehicles requested for the number of passengers that are going. So I'm going to check my passenger count here in the second column, and then I'm going to check my vehicles needed in the fifth column here, and just do a quick check and say, yes, that's good, all that's fine. If I needed to make a change, obviously I would just open the trip request and fix the number of vehicles requested or needed in the trip request form, so that that would be accurate when I send this particular trip to be bid on by those drivers. Now, once you have done that, then you will just simply open the bid, and that's very easy to do. It is a setup table, and it's the very last one, and so you would come in to your bidding schedule, and then you would see a list of your bid periods, and you would simply find the bid period that you want to open, for example, and click on the bid period, and then just set that bid period to open by clicking on the yes and submitting that, and that will open up that bid period for you. Once the bid period is open, of course the drivers are aware of that. You probably would have some sort of a routine. We always open the bid period the Monday before, the Tuesday before, whatever it is, the bid period, whatever your plan would be for that. And then your drivers are going to bid. At the appropriate time, when the bid is closed, then you would come in and click on that bid period again, and it was open, and now you're going to close it. And so once you close the bid, then the drivers are not able to see the trips in that bid period anymore to bid on them, and you can go ahead and make your assignments at that point. So making the assignments is done from the driver tab, and you do have a view kind of like what your drivers have, for making their bids. But in order to award those trips from the driver tab, you're going to choose the option down here under assignment called bid assignment, and that's going to open up and show you the trips that the drivers have bid on. Notice that you can select a zone at a time, and then you would select the bid period that you were going to be bidding on. And once you have selected that bid period, then you would see a list of your drivers who have bid on trips during that bid period. Now notice that your drivers are going to be listed by seniority, and but you can choose to list them by name if you would like to, which is just going to make them alphabetically. And if you use designations, you can even drill down and also see by designation. Now the trips that the driver has bid on are going to be listed here in the panel that says bids for your driver, and then in the top panel it's the assigned trips. So there's nothing in the assigned trips right now because we have not made any assignments for that driver during that week or 2-week bid period. Now, notice here also in the assignments panel here, we do have a way that you can view the regular route hours that driver normally drives, and we do have a feature that will allow your drivers to give up hours in order to take a trip. So if you would like to allow them to back out hours from their regular route so that they can take a trip and not put themselves in overtime for that week, that feature is available. But it is something that you could turn off, and it is not available for your drivers to back out hours. But seeing the number of hours and then the number that you're going to assign and kind of keep up with how many total hours they have that week can be helpful information just for you, especially if you're concerned about overtime hours. Now, when we look at our drivers, again, they're listed over here on the left in seniority order. And you're just simply going to make your way through those drivers, seeing what trips they were interested in. And as I can see here, this driver is interested in this trip number 1. That's their most priority trip. And I see a button that says assign. So that means that they are available. They're not already, that trip's not already assigned to someone else. It does show me that I have a vehicle mismatch. So basically, if your drivers have assigned vehicles, the type is mismatched. So the request asked for perhaps a yellow bus, and the driver has a different type of bus assigned to them. That's not a big deal. You would simply just change the vehicle if you would like to. Probably most of the time this wouldn't be, with only having a limited number of types of vehicles in your district. We do see that there is a count here, the number of adults and the number of students and whether a lift was required. I can see a little more detail here. If I click on the little arrows, it's going to give me a little bit more detail about this particular trip if I need to see the date and where the schools and where they're going. So that would be the information if I clicked on to show the details. If you would like to assign this trip to this driver, it's very easy. You would simply just click the assign button, giving that driver their first priority trip. Now, as I do that, notice it puts that trip now up in the top panel for this week of the bid period. So if you're doing 2-week bid periods, this first panel would be the first week and the second panel would be the second week. If you're doing 1-week bid periods, then the panels would just show, just a week at a time. And so I can see here that I have assigned this particular driver this particular trip. It's a 4.5-hour trip. And so notice here I have added 4.5 hours to that driver's weekly total. And I can see now they have a total of 24.5 hours for the week because they are regularly driving 20 hours that week. If I need to make any notes, I can as I make this assignment. If I click on the little notepad here, it's going to give me a place to put in a note into the history in the driver log. So you can add that in if that's something that's important as you make your assignments. Now I've assigned that particular driver to that particular trip, and I'm ready to go to the next driver. And so I would simply just click my next driver, and it's going to bring up that driver's priorities, and I can see that driver's first priority is available, and if I'm going to try to give them what they want as far as priorities, I would assign that to them. And again, it's going to throw that trip up into the appropriate week. This is going into the second week of this particular bid period. It's a 7-hour and 15-minute trip, and it has added to their regular 15 hours another 7 hours and 15 minutes, giving them 22 hours for the week, 22 hours and 15 minutes for the week. And then I'm going to go to my next driver and continue on with this particular driver. Now notice that that driver already has been assigned to a trip this week, and it's showing up there in my information here, so I'm aware of that. That driver's already got 5 hours in additional trips, but I look down at the priorities and they are available for this particular trip. And I'm going to go ahead and assign them that one. And notice I'm just working my way down my list, assigning drivers and trying to give them their first priority. Now, if it isn't a trip that you want them to have, you certainly have the freedom to assign any trip that you would like to that's available for the assignment. Now, notice in this example, this driver, trip number 4, they're interested in it, but the trip is not available. It's already been assigned out probably to someone else that's higher seniority than this particular driver. But you are free to assign any trip that you would like to. If you don't want to give them their first priority, you don't have to. So you could assign any trip to this particular driver, whatever works best for you, and logistically how it's going to work best for the district to assign these out. And so then I'll just continue to work my way down. Now this driver's first priority is not available, though it's probably been assigned to a senior driver, but I can give the second priority to this driver and add that in. Again, it shows up on the panel for that driver. And now I'm down to my last driver, and I can assign this driver second priority. And you notice how quick this is going. This is going very quickly, very nicely. Now I'm back to the top again. So I would start back over and go back to my top driver and continue to assign out trips. Now, as I'm assigning trips, notice here on the right, there's a panel that shows the trips that are needing to be assigned this period. And as I'm assigning, my list is getting shorter because I'm fulfilling the request. And so that is a nice thing to be able to watch, to know that you are fulfilling the request of the trips that are needed to be assigned during this particular bid period. So there is a count here over little numbers like how many vehicles were requested, how many you've assigned, and these, are really probably not too important for you to keep an eye on. These are really more for troubleshooting and things like that we might have to do here on our end, but you can see that information. Uh, the trips themselves, you can click on those from that view, and it would show you, take you right into the trip request, so that if you needed to make a change to something, you could, even from the bid. And of course, it did open in a new tab, so we would just click back over to our bid page and continue with our bid process. Also, we do have available to you information about the driver, so if you needed to see a little bit more before you decided about making that driver assignment, you could pull up and see preferences maybe that they had indicated. Their vehicle number, the vehicle type is here, so the information about the driver is collapsed on the screen, but available and visible to you as you are making those assignments. We also have over on the left some other driver information available that you can click on to the driver table. A driver inquiry is there that gives you some filtering options, so all of that information is there as well as you are determining which driver you want to assign to any particular trip. So making the assignments, you're just going to work your way through all of your drivers and go through your list, and then back to the top if you need to finish assigning out all the trips that are going out in that particular bid. If for some reason that you came to a situation where you had made an assignment, but then you needed to back that one out and change it, there is an unassign button here, and so we could click to unassign that driver and pull that driver back off of that particular trip because we needed that driver to be available maybe during that time for a different trip. It was more important, for you to be able to assign that one. So you can pull that driver off. And so now that you have made your assignments and you've gone all the way through your list, at this point you would just start back at the top and continue assigning until all of your trips have been assigned out. So if you wanted to go ahead and look at your next driver that you've come back to the top and assign them maybe their next trip that's in their list in their priority order, and then put that trip up there for them. Now it may come a scenario where you need to unassign a driver. Maybe you've realized that you've assigned a driver to a trip and you really need that driver to be available for another trip during that date and time, and you want to remove them from that trip. And so it's very easy to do that as well. Notice here the button now says unassign, and so if we needed to take this driver off of this trip, we would simply click the unassign button and remove them from this trip. If you wanted to make a comment about that for the history, remember you can click on that and make a mention of that in the history that you've unassigned that driver from that particular trip before you click the unassign button. So we'll click that unassign button, and then notice that now that trip goes away from that particular driver. I also wanted to point out how you will be able to manage those vehicle mismatch or lift mismatch. Let's talk a little bit about that if we have a vehicle or a lift mismatch. So notice here in this example with this driver, this trip we've actually already assigned, but it was a lift mismatch. And so if you see the message of lift mismatch, it's basically saying, for example, this trip no lift is needed. This driver drives a vehicle with a lift, and so there's a lift mismatch. And so you may want to take that in consideration when you're making the assignment. Perhaps if there is a lift mismatch, you would like to save that driver for a trip that does need a lift bus, so that they're available and can go on that particular trip instead of putting them on a trip with their lift bus on a trip that doesn't need a lift bus. So that may be a consideration to make. You can still assign a driver. If there's a lift mismatch or a vehicle mismatch, you certainly can assign the driver and then change the vehicle that they drive after you've done your bids. There's a couple of well, probably, a certain ways you can do that. You can just make a note of it, write it down that you're going to need to make a change, maybe to trip 3610 if you've got that lift mismatch or a vehicle mismatch, and then you can go back into trip 3610 and change the vehicle after you have done your assigning. You can go into your all trips here under the assignments and make a change to the assignment that way as well. You may want to open a new tab and have the all trips open in a new tab, but you would simply just click on the all trips and it's going to bring up a list of your trips. You will select the zone that trip was in, and then the bid period for that particular trip, and then you can see that the trips are listed here that have been assigned. And so let's see if we can, here's the trip 3610, and there is a little drop down here to show details, so you can use your drop down. There is a button here to show all the trips that have been assigned or unassigned, so that would be another good view. So you can just show me my trips that I have assigned, or just show me my trips I have not assigned. So after you finish bidding or assigning out the bids, you might look at the unassigned and see ones that are still out there and need to have a vehicle assigned. But I did want to show you the show details. So if I click on show details, it's going to automatically bring up the assignments that I can see. You can use the little arrow over here to just do them one at a time, but you can show all of the details, so you can see in this particular trip which driver and which vehicle has been assigned. You can print your trip tickets one at a time here if you'd like to from this view. And then, like I said, when we realized that this 3610 trip is where I needed to put a different vehicle on because of the lift mismatch, or perhaps the other, maybe a type mismatch. But anyway, the trip number will take you back to the trip request form, and then you would just change your assignment just like you would do normally. And so we could come down here, and here's my assignment, of course, and we would want to be able to put a vehicle on that either does or does not have a lift, or is a different type of vehicle. So here we're just seeing our lift buses. So remember, we're going to change it to show me my buses without a lift by selecting the no on the need lift. Then we can click on our change vehicle and give that driver the appropriate bus, which will then make the change in the assignment there. And then just remember to click your save and close, so that assignment has been changed for this particular trip. Now, it did open it up in a new tab, so we might want to come back to where we were, and then we can come back in and double check. We can see that new vehicle has been selected here, and then we could download our trip ticket. So that's one way to manage that, changing the vehicle and doing it while you're making your assignments. Then we could come back up to our bid assignment and go back in and continue our assigning. Or you can wait till the end, after you've already completed your assignments, and look at it that way. So that would be maybe a way to manage that and changing your vehicles if the driver's not driving the right vehicle for that particular trip. The uh, the trip tickets, like I showed you, you can go to the all trips and get your trip tickets one at a time, or you can continue your current process of printing trip tickets either from the assignment inquiry or from your daily schedule, accessing it from the um, vehicle calendar or the driver calendar, how you're currently doing that. So that process, would not necessarily need to change when you're using your electronic bidding. Remember that everything that you're doing here in the bidding does log that in the driver log, so you do have easy access to that, and you can see whenever you made any assignments, you'll be able to see that information very easily when you're assigning out those bids. So we've assigned Sheldon to some trips, and so here he is being assigned and unassigned as the case may be from trips in the bid period. So that information is there as well, and it does open in another tab, so you might want to exit out of that tab and go back to where you were. So that's basically how the assignment piece works with the electronic bidding. Obviously, you would be completely trained on making these assignments. Obviously, there is a quick reference guide, but you would, obviously have all the training that you would need and to help you out with this bidding. But the bidding can be very helpful and can streamline your process, particularly because your drivers are indicating their interest and availability in trips before the trip, before the assignment, rather than after, and letting you know that they're not available. Instead, they're letting you know that they are available. So hopefully this is helpful to be able to see this, and I appreciate your time.